The Goodbye Road continues today as we're moving closer and closer to Easter. Today's Palm Sunday, and we're just days away from celebrating Good Friday together and then Easter. But today we're continuing on the Goodbye Road on this concept of discipline, or maybe self-discipline, or maybe we could say self-control. And as we move down this goodbye road for this, the reason that we're going to talk about this, I think one of the easiest ways to talk about discipline and self-control, even though it has an overarching theme over many areas of our life, the one that's probably the easiest intersect point, and I'll let you apply it to all the different areas of your life where you're like, you need more discipline or you need more self-control and all this, but I think the easiest way to talk about it is through money. And that's because I think the Bible says more about this than anything else, and the reason is because our wallets, my wallet, your wallet, follows our heart. And so why did you buy something is most likely because your heart kind of got consumed with it and you were like, oh, I just have to, right? You know how that is. And so once your heart gets involved in spending decisions, it takes little convincing for you to follow suit with your wallet. So what does my money have to do with Easter? What does my wallet, what does my money have to do with that? So since everyone's talking about it, I figured we should talk about this here together. And the goodbye road to Easter begins with us. It begins with me. It begins with you. It begins with we as we begin to go. And so in week one, we kind of agreed together that it's not a they problem. If they would get their act together, if they could, whoever they is, if they would be more responsible, then I could. If they would say I'm sorry, then I would. But rather it's a me, we thing. And we can't control other people. We can't control other entities. We can't control the government, all these kinds of things. But we can control and we can learn how to manage ourselves better, which means we probably need to say goodbye to a few things in our life. And so we said we're kind of like the multi-millionaire actor or athlete who had to declare bankruptcy. I mean, we kind of have had it all, but yet we've had to declare bankruptcy. And we've all said that we don't understand how a multi-million-dollar athlete or an actor or actress can go bankrupt. I mean, you just would look at that and go, how do you do that? How do you have all of that and then squander it all or invest it away or something to the point where you have nothing? And it's not that those people had a financial problem. They had a discipline problem. They had a discipline problem. So in the context of things that, things never change, I've loved talking like personally and then panning the camera back, zooming back out to talk about the federal government, because I think it's the easiest thing to pick on is the federal government, and then we bring it back in closer to do with what we can do here. But so let me ask, do you think our federal government is really disciplined when it comes to spending? You feel like you're getting your money's worth? We paid our taxes this week, got them back from our accountant, and man, I'm not gonna lie, I was looking at my wife Erin and kind of going, what are we getting for this again? Now if you get a return, that's awesome, good for you. We didn't, and so and so it's a little harder, it's a little more painful when you do those kinds of things. And do you feel like the state of Illinois is disciplined and uses a lot of financial restraint when it comes to our money, when it comes to the state? You feel like, oh yeah, man, it's worth it. Yeah, our taxes are high, but that makes it worth it, right? Do you feel like that? Do you feel like that? There's something that happened before Jesus was born. And I know there's an internal conflict with a lot of people with how things are now and how things were in antiquities. And, we're smarter now, we're better educated, all this. Well, I want to kind of walk you almost 50 years before Jesus is born, as the Roman Empire is becoming the Roman Empire. Cicero says this. This is what he says as financial advice for the government, right? This is what he says. The budget should be balanced. That's interesting. The treasury should be refilled. Public debt should be reduced. The arrogance of officialdom should be tempered and controlled, and the assistance to foreign lands should be curtailed lest Rome become bankrupt. People must again learn to work instead of living on public assistance. 55 years before Jesus. Real idiots back then, aren't they? They just don't know anything. So as we begin to look at this, one of the things that we want to go is now this guy ends up getting beheaded by Mark Antony, probably because he was too rational and he wasn't a great politician, right? So most likely because he was extremely principled. He was principled in how he approached his job, public works, and all of these kinds of things. So today, as we kind of go through these pieces of the Goodbye Road, I'll share some stuff of where we've gotten it right and gotten it wrong. But one of the things that when Aaron and I were first married, we got some advice, or we decided early on that we would only use credit cards for like convenience if we didn't have cash for it, but not as a replacement for cash. And so we decided very early on, that we would pay off our credit cards at the end of every month, no matter what. And so when we were married, that was, and honestly, one of the best decisions that we've ever made is we've not given $1 of interest to a credit card company. And so we decided that we would use it for convenience, and then we paid them off. And then we were a little weird, and we were a little strange early on too, because we would buy used cars. Like we would buy used cars, and we paid cash for a couple of those cars, and so we didn't have auto debt. And then we did something that was really, really weird. I mean, it was just so weird. We only lived off of what I made as a youth pastor, and we took everything that Aaron made as a teacher, and we paid our school loans off in 2 years, which is just very un-American. I mean, it's very un-American. And so we got some good advice early on, and it's made it different because we knew kind of out of the gate that when she was a teacher and that as I'm a pastor, that we weren't going to all of a sudden one day wake up with a lot of money, right? You don't do those kinds of things to get rich. We learned that we were going to need to be disciplined and smart as we begin to go through these. And so there's been hard things along the way, and I just want to share some of the things. I mean, this is kind of the problem if you live that way. This is what happens. There's things that you can't have even though you really want it. That's hard. There's been things along the way that we wish, wouldn't it be awesome if we could and if we should and all this. And we wanted things, but it didn't fit into our lifestyle. And so we've had to say no. The other thing we've learned is you can't have everything even if you can afford it. Now this one's harder, right? Because if you can afford it, then why not? But we could buy things, but we decided that it doesn't make sense for us to do that. And honestly, this is a struggle like every week. This isn't like something we graduated from. We're still on the JV team of like, for sure, parenting. And when it comes to money and all these kinds of things too, we're just on the JV team. But we have to talk each other, a lot more Aaron to me than me to her. But just going, yeah, we could, but I don't know if this makes sense, right? This is a hard one though. Ready? You can even make the same amount of money as somebody else, one of your friends. And have you ever wondered this? Have you ever looked at somebody and go, I think we probably about make the same, but how can they afford that? How can they afford it? You ever looked at somebody get something and you go, how are they able to do that? You ever wondered? Well, answer is they probably can't. They probably can't. The other thing is you have to live on a budget. You have to live on a budget. And here's another key thing, and we're talking about discipline this morning. It's just easier to talk about with money. When the money runs out, you have to quit spending. See, not much has changed since 50 years before Jesus. I know it's archaic. I know those ideas are archaic, and most people are more sophisticated than we are. They have multiple lines of credit, and they're able to have home equity lines, and they don't ask how much something costs. They ask how much is the payment going to be? How much is the payment? And if I can just manage the payment, then their lifestyle is able to escalate. But then the problems start to kick in, and the strangest things happen is if at some point you run out of your ability to borrow, and you're sort of reduced to accept the facts. And the facts are never pretty. And the facts are this: you can't have everything you want. And you can't have everything you thought you could afford. Here's the problem with that is, if you ever bought something, maybe it's a car. I hate cars, even though they're helpful when it's snowing outside and you need to get somewhere. But But it's like, you ever have something and you get one and then you're still paying for it, but you look at it and you go, man, that thing's a piece of junk. Or maybe it's something you bought on credit and you're like, man, this is great, but you're still paying for it like it's awesome, but it's not anymore. And so these are the things that we want to do as we kind of look at, when the money runs out, you got to quit sinning. So I want to give you kind of two scenarios, and we're going to kind of bring this in, and you'll kind of see where I'm heading with this. So similar things, but you have two options. Scenario one is the one that I've talked about. You can tell yourself no. You can tell yourself no when it comes to discipline and spending, and you can tell yourself no, you can't have it. Scenario two is you can have it until the credit card company says you can't have anymore. So you can discipline yourself, or else you go to the edge and then somebody else has to tell you, no, you can't do anymore. You can't have anymore. Scenario one, the financial pressure revolves around trying to make more money so you can get stuff. How many have had this? I mean, I've tried this for a while. Maybe if we just make more money, that would help, right? Well, that's what you would think, right? That I'll just earn my way to how I want to spend. The problem is, you don't know what that number is. You don't have a number that says, well, when we make this, then we'll have enough. We'll be able to do what it is. You don't have it. All you know is it's more. And so that doesn't work. Scenario two, the financial pressure revolves around paying for things you've already purchased, right? You've already talked about that. Scenario one allows you to plan for the future. Scenario two forces you to have to pay for the past. Scenario one, when you hit a bump, you go into recovery road. You use your savings. You kind of navigate some things. Scenario two, when you hit a bump, you're already in recovery mode, and a little bump can make a major setback and cause major stress at home. So let's just pull this out for a little bit, because I know this is fun for everyone. So let's pull this back out and pick on the federal government for a little while. Okay, they can handle it. You needed a break anyway, chance to catch your breath. So the U.S. recently has hit a bump, right? The music stopped. We have no music, or we have no more margin, and we have no money in the bank right now, right? We're out of COVID recovery money, and we gave tons and tons of money away. So we've just decided to continue to raise the debt ceiling. And it's slowly dawning on us that we can't have everything we want. We can't have low taxes, a giant military, huge entitlement programs, and oh, by the way, don't touch Social Security, with 3% unemployment, and oh, everybody can go to college. Right? Like, what are you saying, Paul? Which ones do you think we should do? Well, no, I'm not. I'm just saying we can't do it all. Like, it's impossible to do it all. And it's slowly beginning to make us realize that the things we once had, like $2 a gallon for gas, I mean, I'd vote for that. That was nice, right? Things we used to have, big military, you finished the list. You finished the list of all the things that we had or wish we had or want to have and all this, and we can't afford it all. But we can't seem to get that balanced. We can't seem to get that budgeted, because we elect people to do that work for us, and if they cut something that we like or somebody else likes, they don't last very long in office, do they? Right? They kind of disappear. And it's true at the national level. It's true at the state level. It's true at the local budget. But the problem is the fact that the money has run out hasn't impacted our spending. We're now engaged in deficit spending. And all of this is so strange to me, because I don't know about your money, but on my money, and maybe it's because we don't use real coins and real dollars anymore. We just, swipe, and it's my debit card, is fine, okay? But it's so interesting that we've got here, because what's it say on our money? It says, in God we trust, right? Or trust in God would essentially be the piece. And so trust in God about what he says about the stuff in our life. And so you didn't ask, so I'm going to pretend like you asked. So I want to begin to look at this, and let's assume, what does God have to say on debt and spending? Oh, that's so interesting. You didn't ask. I know you didn't, but let's pretend like you did. When God was establishing Israel as a nation, and we're not God's nation. I don't want you to pick that up. Israel was God's nation. When he was he made several conditional promises to them. In the book of Deuteronomy are several of them. He made several conditional promises that were to Israel, and they were conditional upon Israel's obedience. And if they could get these things right, then God would have to be a part of this. And so one of God's blessings was that Israel would be able to lend money to other countries, but they would not be allowed to borrow it. So in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 12, we have this like law that this is what it says here. It says, the Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of his bounty, to send rain on your land in season and to bless all the work of your hands. You can lend money to many nations, but you will borrow from none. So essentially, God has said this: it's better to make interest than to pay interest. Boy, I wish somebody would have told me that when I was 20-something. Do you know what I would have done? You know what I would have done? Aaron and I talk about this all the time. You know what I would have done if I had grabbed onto that when I was in my 20s? If you're in your 20s, do this. I would have bought a storage facility unit. Seriously. We all got more garbage than we know what to do with, so we get storage unit. I wish I owned a storage unit facility. Why? So people had to pay me to store their stuff. Right? That would have been awesome, been a great idea. And so here's how this was. Borrowing was evidence that things were going poorly. If you had to borrow money, it was evidence in ancient Israel that things were going poorly, especially if you had to borrow from other nations. Now, it used to be that way here in our country, but remember, you remember your grandparents? Remember your grandparents? What did they do if they needed something? What did they need? Remember this? I remember one time I was with one of my grandparents, and we were at Kmart, and that blue light special went on. If you know, you know. But there wasn't enough money to buy it, and so what do you do at Kmart back in the day if you couldn't afford something and the blue light went on, right? What'd you do? You used layaway, which means for some of you, I'm going to have to educate you. Others of you are like, oh, yeah, layaway, which means you take the item up, they store it in the back, and you come and plunk down some money for it, and then eventually when you pay it off, you can take it home, right? Layaway. Now, here's the thing. Rich people never had to do layaway. Rich people never had to do. Why? They just paid cash. They paid cash. Now, my other grandfather wasn't wealthy. He just got ahead of the game. And he would go every 2 years, he would go to the Buick dealership, and he would trade in his Buick and get a new Buick. Because in the meantime, he got ahead of the game. He would save his money like he was making payments. He would just save it, and he would go and he would trade in his old Buick, and then he had enough cash over 2 years that he would just then go ahead and it had to buy, and he would get the new Buick that came out, which was awesome because his car always smelled just fantastic, right? But he kind of got ahead of the game. And so our grandparents got some things that we probably have kind of missed on. And here's what we know. The richer you are, the more money you owe. I mean, how do movie stars and pro athletes go broke? They live in a culture that says, wow, things are going so well for you that you can behave like someone who things are not going so well for. And the reason that debt was such a concern for God is that he knew what we knew, is that most of us learned the hard way when it comes to this. He says this in Proverbs. This is just wisdom literature in the Bible. Wisdom literature is the Psalms, the Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. These are all like just chock full of wisdom. So if you need more wisdom in your life, Proverbs is the easiest one. Just pick one proverb per day for a month. And by the end of that month, I promise you, you'll just be wiser about some things because you're tapping into the wisdom of King Solomon, who wrote these things down. So this is what he says. The rich rule over the poor. How do they do that? Because the borrower is always slave to the lender. Isn't it true some of you are slaves to Chase Bank, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express? Isn't it true? And so how do the rich rule over you? Well, the borrower is always slave to the lender. They tell you what you're going to do at this point. They tell you how much you're going to pay at this point. And it's a lot more expensive than when you first bought it, isn't it? So here's what we did. We got the rich in debt over I remember after the financial crisis, this was fantastic. We got the rich in debt, we got the middle class in debt, and we didn't want to leave anyone out. So under the guise of compassion, we got creative and loaned money to young and poor people, and we gave them higher interest rates and riskier interest rates, and we called them subprime loans, right? And it was a loan offered at a rate above prime to individuals who didn't qualify for prime rates. And so then we ran out of people to loan money to at that point because we had the rich in debt, the middle class in debt, and the poor in debt. And so then everybody got strapped in, and the music stopped, and who started suffering the most after 2008? The poor. Well, if we've read our Bible well, that ticks off God. Now it's not just poor Americans who are enslaved to rich Americans. Now our entire nation is a bit slavish to another country. And do you know who? Do you know who owns the most U.S. Treasury bonds? Oh, good guess. Heard China. They're number 2. Number 1 is Japan. China used to be the number 1. And why do you think so many people were like weary of China? Because they owned us. Right? You had the same opinion of China as you did of Visa. Same thing. Now it's Japan. So how did they get the upper hand on us financially? Japan and China is one of the most disciplined cultures in the world. And we are one of the most undisciplined countries in the world. Well, this is encouraging. Glad I came today. There's hope. There's hope, but it starts with you and it starts with me. Now, in the olden days, this is how this problem was solved. A king would take his army and march into another country, and they would steal from that country, and they would take the gold of that nation so that they could pay off their debts. Now, that's a little bit more tricky these days to do that, right? Ask Russia how that's working out for them. You just don't do that. So those who have made and there's many people in this room, those of you who have made the long climb out of the pit of debt will tell you it's painful. It requires a ton of sacrifice and discipline and self-control. And there are difficult conversations that you have to have that nobody likes. It starts saying, okay, we're gonna have, this is how much we make, this is how much we owe, this is what our expenses are, and we need to cut back. And usually everybody in your family, everybody in your organization is like, yes, we need to do that. But as long as our TV apps are off limits, we should cut back, but you can't touch my truck. We should cut back, but we can't touch dry cleaning. We gotta have that, right? We can cut back, but you can't take away our. And it just doesn't work. Do you see how this mirrors the government, right at this point, the federal government? We should balance the budget, but don't touch. Don't get rid of. Don't raise our taxes. Don't. Because smart people know the shortest path to financial strength is usually the best path, which means you've got to make some cuts. And how do you get a nation to do that? Well, we could talk about how to get a nation to do that, but let's forget the nation for a minute. How do you get to do that? Pastor Mark a few weeks ago talked about Nehemiahs who are principled people. They're willing to be tough. Principled people are willing to be tough on a generation for the sake of the next generation. We're going to have to get some people that aren't afraid of not getting reelected to kind of help this, because anybody who promises us really good things is either one, lying, or two, just wants to get elected. And so, one of the things that we don't want to do is we don't want to, get into the blame game and it's their fault and this fault and their fault and every one of these kinds of things. Because, credit card and credit, they don't care who's president or who's controlling. And then I hear this argument all the time, we want people that are fair. Well, I don't even know what that means, because you're never going to be able to solve problems being fair. You just won't. And so now, let's bring this back home. If you're going to begin to try to do this work at home, I need to let you You know a few things that you may not know, okay? And my tongue is in my cheek. You just can't see it in the back. All right? Here's what I already know. You don't make your children happy when you tell them no. You don't. You don't make your kids happy when you say, oh, we should do that, but we can't right now. I get it. That does not make your children happy. In fact, your children may not like you for that. I get that. You do not make your children happy when you tell them to get a job. Oh, if you want to buy that, then you need to earn the money for that. If you want to do that, then you need to earn the money for that. I get that. That does not make your children happy. You do not make your family happy when you say, we can't afford that right now. Oh, come on. Right, they're gonna sound like somebody who you just took their Social Security away from them, right? It ain't gonna go well. It's not gonna go well. Or worse, just say, yeah, we could afford that, but it doesn't make sense to buy that. Then they're gonna lose their mind. Because this is what you're going to hear. But you have the money. Right? So you need to be prepared if you're going to begin to live disciplined and self-control. You're going to be prepared that your approval rating as a parent is going to go down. And they may tell you stuff like you won't be reelected. For dad of the year, mom of the year, right? I get that. Now, we've been fortunate. Our kids are great, and some of ours don't even ask now. They just go solve their problems, right? The goodbye road begins when we embrace discipline, self-control. The goodbye road begins when we realize that it requires us to be people that are disciplined, that we are people that, we should collect interest rather than pay interest. Wouldn't it be awesome if we were the generation that put deficit spending and put it in the history books forever? Wouldn't that be awesome? If we were the generation that put deficit spending and debt spending in the history books and just left it there, so that we could be positioned as a generation who is extremely generous. Because here's what I hear more and more. I hear all the time, people are like, oh, I would love to make a difference. I would love to be a part of doing good. I would love to give towards this organization or that organization, but I can't because I'm a slave to some lenders. And so there's a disconnect between what God's doing in your heart and what you're able to do in your head. And so one of the things that we go back to the wisest book ever written, Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28. Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. Is the nation who lacks self-control? Is the family who lacks self-control? Is the person who lacks self-control? Now, there's a lot of areas that we can lose self-control in. We're just choosing today to talk about finances because it's universal, it's extremely uncomfortable, and we can relate it to all areas of our life. But a lack of personal and national self-control got us into this issue, and it's going to take some good old-fashioned self-control to get us out of it. So for you, the same principles apply. It's a lot easier to yell at the government and tell them all your problems and how they should solve all your problems and how you need what you need and all this kind of thing. I get that. That's easier. The harder thing is to sit down with your family and take control of your money. And don't spend what you don't have so that you don't have to disconnect between what your heart is saying on some things from what is actually able to happen. And maybe your issue, and let me be very clear, maybe your issue isn't money. Probably isn't for many of you in this room. There's so many smart people in here. Maybe your issue isn't self-control of finances. It's something else that you just have not been able to get control over. And as a result, it controls you. And whatever that is today, we want you to know that this goodbye road to Easter is for you. So on the back of your seats or at the cross today, maybe you just want to write the thing that you just know you need to get control over with God's help. And you just, man, it's just been eating your lunch. Maybe for years, maybe this week, maybe for months. And you know, this is just your moment where you need to get that and just pin it to the cross and go, Jesus, I know, and we're going to gather in here on Friday, and we're going to gather in on Good Friday, and we're going to remember Good Friday and what Jesus did together. But for us to be able to kind of get some traction in our life, for us to be able to get some movement in our life, we've got to begin to get real about how some things are in our life. And if we're a slave to whatever it is, we're a slave to a habit, an addiction, a spending, eating, whatever it is, those are the pieces that we need to go, God, I need your death to count for that in my life. And I need your power and your courage and everything to come up within me so that we can address some things that are very, very difficult in our life so that we can begin to do that. Today, maybe you're just like our financial picture, whatever the picture is really dark. You may want to go and light a candle today, and you want to light a candle and you just want to say, God, I need some light in this area of my life. Or maybe you want to take communion. There's communion at each one of the stations around, including gluten-free. There's a little placard to let you know which one those are for that, and so we want you to open that up. So today, as we respond, the band's going to sing, and you're going to be invited to sing some songs with them, or if you just want to read the words on the song, I just want you to just take inventory of your life. Just take an audit and go, God, where are the areas of my life, that I'm blaming others or excusing myself, and what can that tell me about where are the areas in my life that I have self-control? Now, you don't have to have a good attitude about self-control. Ask my wife. There's a lot of times I have a bad attitude because I just want to get something, and it's like you just can, or we shouldn't, or we don't, right? But just get some traction in your life can make all the difference, because when you begin to start following Jesus to Easter, which is where we're all going, you want to be able to be free to say yes to whatever God has for your life. Can I pray with you, and then we'll sing? Jesus, today, would you help us? This is just hard. It's not fun. It sounds simpler than it really is. But would you help us to just be honest today about the areas in our life that we need more self-control in? And then would you give us the power to do something about it? It's in your name we pray. Amen.
We are so glad that you joined us here this morning. And as we head into Holy Week, we have the opportunity to look at the last days of Christ's life. As he journeyed to the cross and then rose again on Easter, we can see that every step he took towards the cross was intentional and showed of his great love for us. And because of that, if you've been around Gathering Point for any length of time, you know that much of what we do is very intentional. We want to create environments where our guests and our regular attenders can be welcomed and cared for, so you're more open to hear about the transforming power of Jesus. And so I would encourage you today, as you were leaving, to begin thinking and praying about who God might have you invite to join you on Easter weekend. From our guest service volunteers to the planning of the services, we are preparing for your family and friends to join us. So our Good Friday service will be this Friday at 6:30 p.m., and we'll have childcare for birth through age 4. And then on Easter Sunday, we'll have our normal service times of 9 and 10:30. And our services will, of course, be streamed online on our website and our app. And we hear from many who attend Gathering Point recently that they first checked us out online. So if you have a friend who's just not quite ready to step foot through our doors, perhaps their next best step is to just attend online, attend a service. And if you're attending online today, let me invite you to join us in person next Sunday. But either way, we don't want you or anyone else to miss out on the life change and transformation that can happen as we follow Jesus down this goodbye road. So I look forward to seeing you on Friday, but until then, I hope you have a great week.